Hello again, it's me, your ghost haunting the interwebs. I recently landed on a chill site that lets you and your friends share photos from weddings, parties, and other events without joining those icky, sticky social media sites. Check it out at liveframe.app. That's liveframe.app. Now here's this week's episode.
The air feels heavy in a way that has nothing to do with weather. Somewhere in the distance, there is the low rhythm of movement, boots on wooden floors, the creak of stretchers, the soft, steady work of people trying not to make noise that might carry too far. You are inside a Civil War hospital in the final months of the American conflict. The year is 1865. Inside a long wooden building, rows of wounded soldiers lie on narrow cots. Some are conscious. Many are not. The air is thick with antiseptic, candle smoke, and exhaustion. Outside, the country is still fighting, but everyone inside this room already knows what the war has done. Because by this point, nearly every family in the North and South has received the same kind of letter: folded paper, official seal, a name written carefully at the top, and a life reduced to a few sentences beneath it. Killed in action, missing, died of wounds, gone. In this moment, grief is no longer private. It is national and shared. It's ordinary, and into this world of loss arrives something new, a machine that promises it can hold on to what is disappearing, a camera. But to understand why that matters, you have to go back just a few decades. Before the war, before the mourning, before photography became part of everyday life, back to when an image of a person was still rare. Less than 30 years earlier, in 1839, the French inventor Louis Daguerre introduced a process that could capture light itself on a polished metal plate. The daguerreotype. But you probably know photography much differently. Early photography was slow, delicate, almost ceremonial. A subject would sit motionless for several minutes, sometimes longer, their head held in place by hidden supports so the image would not blur. But in these times, that was a technological advancement. For most of human history, a likeness had to be drawn and painted by hand. The process was expensive and rare. Now, light itself could do the work, and for the first time, ordinary people could sit for a portrait. But these images were not casual. They were scarce, often the only visual record a family would ever have of a person. Sometimes the only image that would ever exist. As photography spread, inventors refined it. In England, William Henry Fox Talbot developed a negative process that allowed multiple prints from a single exposure. Then came faster chemical methods like the wet collodion process, making photography sharper, cheaper, and more accessible. Studios opened across America, and with them came a new kind of domestic ritual. Families sitting stiffly in front of painted backdrops, children told not to move, hands carefully arranged, eyes fixed forward. Because this was not just a picture. It was proof that someone had existed. Photographs weren't subject to an artist's interpretation, not in the same way. A photograph showed the truth. Then came the war. Photographers followed soldiers into the field. Among the most famous was Matthew Brady, whose images of battlefields and dead soldiers shocked the nation. For the first time, Americans were not hearing about war. They were seeing it. Bodies laid out in rows, fields after the fighting had stopped, faces that would never move again. Photography had changed its role. It no longer simply preserved memory. It documented reality. And once people accepted that photographs showed the truth, a deeper question quietly emerged. If the camera can show what is real, could it also show what is unseen? After the war, America turned toward something else entirely: grief, and the belief that death might not be the end of contact. Across the country, spiritualism spread rapidly. In dim parlors, people gathered to attempt communication with the dead. Some sought comfort, some sought certainty, some simply refused to accept silence as final. It was a culture already primed to believe that the unseen world might still be reachable. And into this moment stepped a Boston photographer named William H. Mumler. At first, nothing about his work seemed unusual. A sitter would enter his studio. They would sit for a standard photographic portrait, a chair, a backdrop, a long exposure. But when the image was developed, something else appeared. A second, faint, translucent figure standing beside or behind the sitter, sometimes with a hand resting gently on their shoulder, sometimes just a face emerging from shadow and light. And the sitter would often say the same thing: "That's my husband," or "That's my daughter." Mumler's claim was not that he physically staged a ghost in the room. It was something more unsettling for the time. He suggested the camera could sometimes capture what the human eye could not: a spirit presence already near the living person, a trace of the dead lingering just beyond perception. But how these images were interpreted split into three explanations. For spiritualists, there was no trick at all. They believed the dead remained close to the living. Motional bonds could thin the boundary between worlds, and photography, as a truthful machine, could occasionally reveal that hidden reality. In this view, the camera was not creating anything. It was revealing what was already there: brief overlap between worlds. A more cautious explanation pointed to the instability of early photography. The wet collodion process was fragile and unpredictable. Glass plates were reused. Light leaks were common. Chemicals behaved inconsistently. So what appeared to be spirits could be explained by double exposure accidents, residual images left on photographic plates, or chemical artifacts during development. In this view, nothing supernatural was happening. But the medium itself was imperfect enough to create convincing illusions. And then there were the skeptics. Photographers and stage magicians demonstrated something important. These images could be intentionally produced. By exposing a photographic plate twice, using pre-existing portraits as faint background figures, or inserting secondary images during development. The result was always the same: a translucent figure beside a living sitter. To skeptics, the conclusion was simple: the ghosts were not accidents. They were constructed, and grief was doing the rest. The controversy eventually reached a courtroom in 1869. Mumler was charged with fraud. The question was not whether the images could be explained. It was whether he had intentionally deceived grieving clients for money. Photographers testified. Skeptics demonstrated how the effect could be created. Even the showman P.T. Barnum presented evidence of photographic manipulation. But the case ended without conviction. Not because the images were proven real, but because intent could not be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Mumler was acquitted. Today the mechanics are clear, but that explanation still leaves something unresolved. Because the real mystery is not how the images were made. It is why they worked. Why so many people, grieving, intelligent, skeptical people, looked at a faint figure in a photograph and saw someone they had lost. The answer lies not in photography alone, but in the moment itself: a nation overwhelmed by death, a new technology that appeared incapable of lying, and a public not yet trained to separate mechanical truth from emotional truth. Like in today's world of artificial intelligence, every new technology begins as a kind of magic. And in that brief moment before understanding catches up, people see not just what is there, but what they hope might still remain. Because in the end, the most haunting thing about the ghost photographs of the 19th century is not the figure beside the sitter. It is the sitter themselves, still hoping, still looking, still asking a machine to return something it was never designed to give.
If you like this podcast, leave a rating here or a comment at urbanartantiques.com. Thanks for listening to Antiques, Mysteries and Great Paintings.
I can't do it anymore. Too many humans screaming, it's exhausting. And these modern flashlights, they ruin the ambiance. I can't get that eerie glow going with LED everywhere.
I hear you. It sounds like you're haunted by modernization.
Exactly. And they expect subtlety. Subtlety. People don't respect ghostly silence anymore.
We can work on that. And remember, therapy helps even the most restless spirits.
Feeling stressed as a spirit? Call Dr. Specterstein, because even the dead deserve peace of mind. Find him in the 1937 to 1964 city directory in your local library.